Hi, Ashley here with hearthookhome.com, and today we are going to learn how to crochet this gorgeous drop loop stitch. This stitch is a stitch I'm using in my new swimsuit cover-up pattern, and it is absolutely divine. You see how see-through it is? It is great for a swimsuit cover-up like we are crocheting with this pattern, or just as another garment, as a very nice lightweight summer top. I don't think I'd use this for a blanket because toes could get caught on this easily, but it is a very beautiful stitch, and it's basically just like a very, very tall single crochet. So let's learn how to crochet the drop loop stitch today. When crocheting the drop loop stitch, you'll want to start your piece with several rows of a solid crochet stitch. This is the single crochet, and I've done 4 rows of 20 stitches. If you're watching this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you have some crochet experience and that you know how to start your single crochet or half double crochet, however you want to do it, that solid stitch that you're going to be working into. You will need a crochet hook, as well as your yarn, of course, and you're going to need a dowel rod or a broomstick, etc. This stitch is similar to broomstick lace, except we are doing things just a little bit differently, and honestly, I feel like it goes a little bit faster. So this right here is a 1-inch dowel rod. You can use a 3/4 inch, you can use a smaller one. The size of your rod will determine the height of your stitch, because we're going to put it around this dowel rod. So if you have a really, really big dowel rod, you're going to have really, really tall stitches, and if you use a tiny little dowel rod, you're going to have really short little stitches. I found that the 1-inch is a perfect middle ground for me. So first things first, you've got your foundation here, your beginning piece of your project, that is the solid crochet. When we go to make these drop stitches, first things I'm going to do, I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to kind of pull this chain just a little bit smaller. And you're going to do this on every single stitch that you make, because that chain that you do at the beginning is going to keep that loop from moving around too much or changing size. So I'm going to pull up a loop that's very tall. I'm going to get my rod and I'm going to put it into position. I hope this isn't too difficult on camera. I thought I might need to sit down. So I'm going to take this very tall loop, I'm just going to put it over the end of this dowel rod, just like this. Get your hook out, perfect. We're going to pull it tight so that it's secure, just like this. I mean, you don't want it so tight that you can't move it, but just tight enough that it's easy to secure, etc. I'm going to turn my work like this. And now I'm ready to pick up my loops in each of these stitches. And all we're going to do is we're going to pull up loops, put them on the rod. Pull up a loop in the next stitch, put it on the rod. Pull up a loop on the next stitch, put it on the rod, right? So make sure that your stitch here is a little bit tight. This is the first stitch of that row, so I'm going to insert my hook into the next one, and I'm going to do that little chain. And when you do this chain, it will also help to tighten up this big loop as you go. So we're going to pull up a chain just like this. I'm going to chain again, or pull through again, make this chain a little bit smaller. So pull it kind of tight like this. And again, this is to where it won't move around too much after you make these loops. So now that I've pulled up like this, I'm going to take the loop closest to me and I'm going to put it around the back. Just like that. And remove my hook. And now I'm going to pull to get that loop to be the same size as the first one. You want these loops to be as uniform in size as possible. And you know, when I put my loop around this rod, I always put the loop closest to me around the back, and that's just for consistency's sake. If you want to do the opposite, it's fine. I just like to remain consistent so that my stitches look nice and uniform. So I'm going to continue pulling up a loop, pulling up a loop, pull that chain a little tight, pull it up, grab the top, go around the back like this, remove your hook, and pull it tight. That's all you're going to do the entire way. Pull up a loop, pull up a loop, pull it a little bit tight, bring it up, go around the dowel rod, remove your hook, and pull it tight. And you're just going to do that all the way to the end of the row. As you go, as you are adding these tall loops to your dowel rod, you'll just want to move them on down the rod. I have noticed that it might help, depending on the rod, when you go to pick out your rod at the craft store, run your finger up and down it to make sure that it's not got any snaggy bits. You might want to sand it down just a little bit. I also find it helpful to just keep moving these down the rod and not to knock them off if at all possible. Try to get the entire row on there without removing some from the back end, if that makes sense. I'll show you here in a second when we go to complete this row or to do the next row, how much of a difference that makes. So you can see that I've got pretty uniform shaped loops here. I've got 2 left. I'm going to do my last ones. Okay, now this is my final one. And what I do love about this stitch, it's a little bit tedious, but at the same time, these rows are so tall. So it's like you're crocheting several rows in one, right? All right, so I've got all of these bad boys on my rod here. You can see that they are all very uniform in shape, nice and tight on the rod itself. Now, it is time to knock all of these off. So we are going to turn. I'm going to have to get positioned here. I've noticed that, let me stick it underneath my tripod, see if that works. I've noticed that when I'm sitting on the couch, this works really well for me if I put one end, the end that I'm not working on, so I would put this under my left knee and over my right knee. And as I'm adding them, I have it under my right knee and over my left knee, if that makes sense, just to kind of hold the rod in place to keep it from moving around too much. So now this next part here is very similar to a Solomon's knot. If you have made the lover's knot or the Solomon's knot crochet stitch, this part right here is pretty similar to that. So I've got my yarn. This is my working yarn coming off of the bottom of that last big loop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the base of this one as securely as I can so that when I pull this loop off, it doesn't get really big or shrink down in size. So I'm going to kind of push these towards the end. And I only want to take off one loop at a time. So I'm going to move this last one off to the end, just almost falling off, okay? I'm going to pinch it right here to help it from getting too different in size. I'm going to put my hook in like this. And now I kind of pull it off to the side. Do not pull too tight or you will make that loop a different size. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this through here, and I like to put my fingers right here to keep that back loop separated. Do you see this little tiny triangle right here? That's the back bar of the loop we just pulled up, right? I'm going to do a single crochet in this back bar right here. That's why I like to keep my finger and my middle finger, my thumb and my middle finger, keeping those separated because it's really hard to get your hook in there if you don't create that space. So I'm just single crocheting right there in that stitch. Pull it just a little bit tight, and now I'm ready to start knocking all of these off of the dowel rod. So part of the reason that I do not like to remove any of these loops until I get to this point, I've seen, you know, in my testers we were talking about if you were to run out of room on your dowel rod and you were to take all of these loops off, they would be going in different directions and they would be twisted around, and it's just very difficult to keep the orientation, and it just takes forever to do it that way. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to insert our hook under the next loop, pull it off, and I like to bring it kind of perpendicular because now this loop is not going to change in size. Since we did these tiny little chains down at the bottom, this loop here is not going to change around. So just pull it kind of perpendicular and then do a single crochet in that loop. Pull the next one off, pull it a little bit perpendicular and do a single crochet in that loop, right? So you're going to move them down to the end and just knock them off individually with single crochets. Move some more down to the end and just continue. I have noticed that when you're making these single crochets here, it helps if you don't make these too tight for the next row, for the following row. So just knock all of these little guys off with your single crochets. So like I said, it's almost like just a really tall single crochet, right? You just keep going on the dowel rod, then turn and knock them off. This stitch is really pretty easy. The most important thing is staying uniform in the size of your loops, so that the tightness of your loops, and then keeping the orientation going the same way. And now we're done with that dowel rod until we're ready for our next drop loop row. So this is how it looks when we're done, right? Now, it's also important to note that anything that you make with this stitch, you're going to want to block it when you're finished. But isn't that nice and tall and beautiful? I absolutely love it. So now you would want to add a couple more rows of single crochet or half double crochet, whatever it is that you're using, in between rows of drop loop, because it just keeps the integrity of the fabric. It makes it kind of just stick together a little bit better. So you just chain one and turn and do your single crochets or your double crochets or whatever it is that you're doing in between these drop loop rows all the way to the end. And that's it, right? That is it. Easy peasy, nice and fun. Great for that swimsuit cover-up, which is the Phoenix swimsuit cover-up coming up on Heart Hook Home this week. So excited. Thanks for watching, and I will crochet with you soon.